Hello. Hey everyone. We're using a different mic today so that you can hear both of us. So could you let me know if you guys can hear us and if everything is good to go? So yeah. This is Dan.
Hello.
He's lead animator at Blue Zoo and one of the fastest animators I've ever worked with. Really talented, and yeah, excited to do this. So we're gonna switch now to Maya, and he'll explain to you what he's doing, and it's gonna be a different kind of session, so we're both in it, we're both talking, kind of like a podcasty type thing. Cool. All right, so let's get into it. Let me just maximize this so we can see the chat, and there we go.
Cool. Right, so what I thought we'd go over today was this tracer animation I did. So I've just, starting from the first two poses I had when I did this, and the idea that I want to go over is how my workflow and Beta's animation checklist, how they work together, because I think we have quite a similar philosophy and approach.
Yeah, and the weird thing is that I think when we were talking about it once, we realized that we do the same thing but in reverse.
Yeah, probably.
Right?
Yeah.
You guys watch today and see for yourself. It's like, it's really close, but it's like, if he comes left to right, I go right to left, like in terms of how we do our posing. But we just watch and see.
Well, yeah, this might even be a bit different because I revise my workflow probably weekly. So this might be out of date information by next week. So today I'm going to try and concentrate mostly on talking about how I manage contrast in poses and the breakdowns. So there's a couple of people on the forum saying they'd like some more help on breakdowns. I think the way I'm going to talk about breakdowns today might sound a little bit crazy, but it might open some doors to some different thoughts.
It might like, you might have an aha moment with it, because one thing to see my approach, but it's also another to see like someone else's approach and kind of be able to compare, see which one of them, how you can like blend the two or see which one works better for you. Yeah.
Also, I'd say what I'm going to present as well is kind of like a 4-frame rule for breakdowns. If that makes sense.
Okay, so let's see that.
So let's talk about contrast first, because that's the first thing we're going to deal with. So you've got line, which is obvious. It's the sort of stuff you get told all the time. It's your C curves or your reverse C or your S shape curves. So with these two poses, she's got this C curve, and then with this curve, it's the reverse of that. So that's one way to get contrast between your poses. The second way to get contrast is by shape, and when I think about shape, I think of boxes.
Okay.
So this might be
so it's more like more like the way you look at the overall.
Yeah. So if we again look at this is what I would refer to as is that? Oh, we need to show that, don't we? Yeah.
Grease pencil.
So this is like a tall. That's not on her at all, but it's a tall, thin box compared to this, which is if if we ignore like the head, this shape is wider and flatter. So you're getting contrast between those two shapes, and you can even start to see between these.
It makes it easy to see where you can put your breakdown.
Yeah. Because you're going from, it's like you've got a stretched object and you're going to squash it down. You can kind of already feel that that weight, I guess. I don't know what you'd call it.
It's almost like you're not worrying about the overall. Well, you are worrying about the overall shape, and you're not worrying about the details.
Yeah. It's kind of like a silhouette.
Yeah.
But even more abstracted. So, then the next way to get more contrast is to add an anticipation and an overshoot. And the way I would think about that, when I've got my boxes, so I think I'm going to do an anticipation. So she needs to get taller and skinnier. So I might draw out a box like that. Oh no, that's awful, right?
But you're not actually drawing these in real life.
I'm not. I'm just
imagining them.
Yeah. So again, that's awful. But it's bear that in mind with what I'm going to do when I pose her. And the same with this one. You would have an overshoot where it's flatter and like that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah. So let's delete these. And with that in mind, I'm going to do, again, I think Beta talked about this the other day. I do all my keys on usually 2s, which, but I do them next to each other without timing them out. Because like you said, it's much easier to focus on spacing without having to think about timing. And timing is it's the hardest thing to master, but it's the easiest thing to change in Maya. You can literally just grab the key and move it.
But that's if you've put everything on the same frame.
Yes, yeah. Which you definitely should be doing.
Yeah, because I remember I'm going to be releasing some of the Maya dissections today, and the 2 that I viewed did not have the keys on the same frame, and it makes it hard to like change the timing and fix it. So, it is so important to put everything on the same frame, especially to be able to do it this way. So you put everything like we did last session, where I put the keys next to each other and then we spread it out to do the timing.
Yeah. So I am going to do the anticipation and the overshoot for this. So I'm going to make some space for that on the timeline. So again, I just want to make this pose taller and thinner. So just raise her up a bit, bring her foot in to close that gap, bring her elbows in. And it's helpful as well if you've got a character like Digby, for example, which we're working on. He's got a tail, so you can even use his tail to make his shape, pull his shape in, or his wings even. If you've got a character with a skirt that can kind of flare out a bit or relax, pull her head up a bit. So she's just going up like that. Actually, I could straighten her spine more. That's in mild space. And so you're just getting more contrast because you're making a more extreme version of the contrast you already had in your poses.
So it's like working within the pose, but keeping it like similar enough, but there's enough difference that it kind of, you can still see it. It's not too subtle.
Yeah. So, and then I'll do the overshoot, and I'll use this pose to work off to do the overshoot. So, like, and like I explained, it would be the shorter, fatter box. But again, we're only going to see this frame for not very long, so I can sort of deform it a bit, I think. I even pull the shoulder out this way to make it wider, and stretch the leg out to make it wider. I probably want to move her hips that way just so she's got somewhere to go.
That's what we call, we always do this, like, go somewhere else. Even if it's like, you don't have to overthink it. Just think of a way to be able to go somewhere with your poses.
So yeah, basically that's not, so I haven't created a brand new pose. I've just pushed the one I already had to conform more to a taller shape, and it's the same with this.
How long does it take you to think of, like, you know, the first pose? Like, how long does it take you usually to come up with a pose like that? Do you just keep playing around with it, or do you thumbnail it, or?
I just play around with it.
Okay.
But that's just experience, isn't it? I think. And I don't think I'm particularly good at posing necessarily. I don't think I'm particularly good at anything in it. But I can do it quickly. So
I think that's probably the way a lot of people feel. But I think one of the things that helps is that I think your poses are quite clear. Like they're simple in terms of their silhouette. Not simple to do and come up with, but they're simple in a sense that they're easy to work with. And I think that's one of the things that makes the animation work better. Yeah.
So yeah, and I think that box method helps with that, because I feel like I'm trying to clean it up to a certain extent by putting it in a box. But obviously you don't have to keep strictly within the limits of those lines on the box. Like I could have, for this antic, I could have like lifted a leg up, for example, which is probably a better pose. But for the time being, I'm just going to leave it down here because I haven't planned for that. Right, okay, so that's contrast, and that's fairly straightforward. So let's talk about breakdowns.
Yep.
So when we talk about breakdowns,
that looks like a mental breakdown.
Exactly. There's a lot of stuff to think about when you put a breakdown in, because a good breakdown will fulfill a lot of jobs, a lot of function. Like that's why you call it a functional breakdown.
Yeah.
So it can be a bit overwhelming. Especially if you're like, I've got this action, I need to put a breakdown in the middle. I don't know what the middle looks like. Yeah. Unless you go out and film reference or find some reference, you don't know what that middle pose is going to look like. So you need to be able to
visualize it.
Yeah, or at least ask questions about it. So this is where I would think about a lot of this stuff. I've spelled offset wrong, but offset. And follow through. You should have to. Anyway.
Probably favoring as well.
Yeah, all of this.
Ignore all the spelling mistakes. It's the essence of it.
Yeah, so I would think about these things as asking questions. So like, what am I offsetting? What am I favoring? What is the arc? Like, it's not just a word; it's a question, which helps. But also, this is still too overwhelming. So I thought, what are the most important parts of this? And I think it's arcs and spacing. And I think within those, because a lot of these words mean the same thing. Like eases are spacing. True. And it is favouring, and it is words leading, following, or dragging. They all kind of are variations of the same thing. It's the context that matters, isn't it? Yeah. So then this is where it's going to sound a bit weird. I would split arcs up into anticipation and overshoot. Okay. And that might sound weird now, but when I demo it, I hope it makes sense. And I would split spacing into lead and follow / drag. Okay, so these are the questions I'm asking myself when I'm putting my breakdown in. Is it anticipating? Is it overshooting? What is leading and what is dragging? The next...
I see where you're going with this. Yeah. So you could say, for example, when it comes to spacing, like, am I leading with, say, the head or with the hips? Yeah. And then what's going to follow and drag? Is it going to be the spine, or is it going to be the bottom half of the body? Yeah. And then with the arcs, you're thinking in terms of how you're going to move. Well, I need to see this one particularly. Yeah. But I think I get it.
I think you get it. Okay, well, there's another part to this.
All right.
What if you did, instead of one breakdown that had to incorporate all of this, what if you did two breakdowns?
Okay. Right? Yeah.
And it's not, you probably think, well, two breakdowns is twice as much work. Yeah. It's not. Because you can split the work. You can split the workload.
So you do a breakdown that kind of favors one side, and then a breakdown that favors the ending part.
Yeah. Aha. So with that in mind, do I have any more slides? Oh yeah, okay. So if this is your timing chart for your break or for your poses,
Yeah.
or your spacing chart, you've got pose A, pose B, then I'd stick 2 breakdowns in. One at this third, one at that third. It doesn't have to be a third, but it's like on the left side of tween machine or the right side of tween machine. If that's an easier way to think about it.
So you're kind of blending your anticipation with a breakdown to a certain extent.
To a certain extent, I hope it'll be clearer when I show it.
All right.
But so then breakdown 1, I'm thinking about the antic and the leading, because if we go back to this one, so you got antic for the arcs and lead for the spacing.
Okay.
And then on breakdown 2, I'm thinking about the overshoot on the arc and what's dragging. So breakdown 1, we're going to look at antic and leading. Breakdown 2, overshoot and drag. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So
let's minimize that in case we can see any questions.
Yeah. So the first thing, we're going to create the first breakdown between this key and this key.
Okay.
So let's make space for it. And like I said, I want to keep on this side of tween machine. So probably pick that one, because I think the wider apart you put the spacing
on the breakdowns.
Yeah, between your breakdown 1 and breakdown 2, the quicker the middle is going to be, because it has to travel further distance.
Yeah.
So I want this to be quite snappy, so I'm going to favour this end of tween machine, the left side.
Yeah.
And that's going to give me a starting point. So if we go back to this, I'm going to think about it in this order. So antic first. And this is where I explain that bit, hopefully. Right. So because this is thinking about the arc as well. So what I do when I'm thinking about the arc is I look at this square, which is the part of the manipulator, and I just follow that with my eye. Like you can draw on your screen, you can use arc trackers and stuff, but it helps to be able to do it just by eye.
I think that's really important. I think a lot of people rely so much on like arcs that are drawn or those things that Maya generates. You need to be able to see it visually, just really with your eye.
Yeah, and that watching this point here is what helps me do that. So what I mean by anticipation is that we've already got an antic to go up and to go before we go down, but when we're talking about the arc, I want to push the arc this way to antic that way before we go this way.
Okay.
So that's why I think it's to do with arcs. Yeah, because I'm following this round that way before it comes that way, and it'll make sense when I do the overshoot as well. I'm going to overshoot down before I come up. Yeah. So if you're thinking about like I said, literally the arc, it could be, if I didn't do this, if I didn't think about it as an anticipation, it would just go straight down like that. Yeah. But because I'm thinking what is going to anticipate, the hips can go that way. And then same with the...
So this is now what's going to need to drag behind as well.
No, this is... in this one, I'm going to think about what's leading the action. So anticipation and lead. Yeah. Right. So the chest is going to anticipate that way as well, I think, before it comes this way. For the time being, I'm just going to do that to keep it simple. And I think what I want to lead is the foot. So we can just push it over that way. And make it so it's not so stretched. And then we can bring the hips down a bit as well. Right, I think this will be okay. And as well, you can start to think about, like, just thinking about arcs in general, you want to watch each part of the body. So I usually go with the hips, then the chest, then think about the arms, like the elbow and the hand. Because I'm in FK, they're probably going to be staying relatively in arc, just naturally. Whereas in IK, you'd have to do some work on that. I know that
I'm a big proponent of IK. I don't know if you prefer IK to FK or FK to IK. I mean, maybe it's because of this rig, or you actually prefer FK. I mean, what's your view?
I prefer FK in world space. So if you rotate, the arms stay oriented the way they are, and and that's just because of the arc thing, I think.
Okay.
Like, obviously, when you've got someone picking something up or leaning against something, with that in mind, you'd start the shot in IK. But generally speaking, you don't have to do that. If it's just a character gesturing or something, just leave it in FK is what I would do. It's not necessarily the correct thing to do. So let's pretend I'm happy with this pose and go to the next part, which is the second breakdown. We're going to look at the overshoot and what's dragging. So we select all, and I need to make a space for my second breakdown. Stick that in there, and I'm going to go on this side of Tween Machine. And then starting from the hips again, like I said, I was going to overshoot it. So at the moment the arc comes out this way and it goes in a straight line. So instead of going in a straight line, I'm going to push it down past where it's going to end up. So down there. And then, what else can we do?
You want to drag.
We want to drag now, yeah. So the arm probably. So drag that out like this is where you put your smear frame in, essentially. I think.
Wait, is that why you have the animate button? It gives you breakdown 1 and breakdown 2 in terms of Tween Machine's position.
When you
there's
say the animate button,
there's this rumor that was flying around that Dan has an animate button where he presses a button and it animates his scene.
No, that does something different. But
okay. So there is one then.
Not quite, but that's a little bit. That's to do with how I set my keys rather than how I do my breakdowns, if that makes sense.
Okay, we're gonna have to do one on that at some point because that's such a mysterious.
So in terms of drag, because that's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
This one, let's drag the head down a bit, I guess. Nah. Actually, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to drag this arm like this, so that it's stretched out. Oh, I don't know if that's script. So that arm is dragging, so that when it pops into that pose, you get that pop back like that.
Cool.
And that's kind of it for breakdowns, right?
Can we just go over there and just scroll down? Oh, yes, fine. Yeah.
So, like, that's kind of an animation.
Yeah. No, it's looking good.
I've lost my train of thought now.
So we wanted, like, after we've done the second breakdown, and that's the drag and
the overshoot.
What's the next step?
So then I'd go and put in eases. Well, first of all, I should mention that by doing it this way, it's kind of really clear where you're missing information. Because that's another way to think about breakdowns is information. So I might think between here and here I'm traveling too far. I need more information. So again, I could make some space and I could put another breakdown in there.
Okay.
But as it is, I think it's okay because it's quite fast action. And it'll do for now. So the next step after putting the breakdowns in would be to do the eases. And the way I approach eases is very simple. I just make some space and I hit one of these buttons over here on the right side of Tween Machine. So that one, for example, and then it just eases like that. But then when you're putting in this ease key, you can still think about this stuff. So we're in this side of the animation, I guess, in this side of the pose to pose workflow. So I'm still thinking about overshoot and drag. So I might want to take the hips and overshoot them again in the even further that way, so that it comes back that way. And then that's how I kind of try and keep characters alive, by kind of doing that, just making stuff subtly overshoot and come back. But it's all part of because these breakdowns, because we've we've taken everything into consideration and we've put that information there. When you put in any new keys, it kind of takes care of itself to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So I mean, everything's already spaced, and it's already kind of in arc.
Yeah, you've put so much information.
Yeah.
As a basic foundation,
Yeah.
that whenever you add something, it will still carry through.
Exactly. So I carry on easing. Just again, hit that button. And you notice I only moved the hips on that pose. I didn't tweak any of the rest of the pose.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the difference between like the level of quality you're going for, I guess. Where if you wanted to do something more complicated, you'd spend more time on these poses and you'd move every little bit of the rig. Whereas I'm like, she's just getting into that pose. We only need to move the hips. Everything else can stay sort of rigid. But it's easy to kind of see where you could spend some more time. Like you could have this arm come down and drag down that way, and then like that or something. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. So it's
easy
like
to
tweak. The mentality is the same. It's just adding detail. Then it's just spending more time on the details.
Yeah, exactly. That does. I think that pose flashes a bit, but that's okay. And hopefully, this should spline fine. Okay, she's tweening into another pose I've got over there, so we'll just step that. And like, that's more than good enough to go on TV.
Yeah.
So
that's the thing. It's like TV to features. It's just about then the polish level, isn't it? So what's like the next thing you would focus on right now if you were to like, or would you just say that's it, you're done with that? Be like, I'm happy with that.
If it was me and this was my work, which it is, I would say that's done and that's fine.
Yeah.
If this was for like a film or something, I don't know, because I've never worked for film. I've never tried to polish anything to that level. But I think the theory is solid enough to, like you said, it's just a matter of putting more detail into and more time into each one of these poses. More thought, more time, more effort, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of it. I do have some bonus poses over here.
Ooh, nice. Well,
if we wanted to carry on and chat.
You're so fast that you've literally done it in half the time.
Well, it took me longer to do it when I did it for my own stuff. So
if you guys have any questions, don't forget just to ask in the chat while we kind of just play around with this next bit.
Yeah. Also, maybe talk about moving holds a little bit.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So the way I literally, the moving hold is the extension of this easing part. I literally go to however long I want the moving hold to be and just hit that. And assuming it's not too long of a gap. So
you basically put a key at the end and then you went back and then you just tweened it to be matching that as close as possible.
Yeah, so then you just get that slight movement and it's just carrying on from what you had before. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I'm so used to that it just makes sense to me. Okay, so let's go back into steps. So with these poses again, I've gone from this squash pose up into a stretch pose where she's spinning.
So we can see literally the rectangle now.
Yeah.
It's very clear.
And then she comes down, and this isn't very pushed, but it's a square. Yeah. Isn't it? So again, I can add more contrast to these by just I want to add an anti. It's not selecting it.
No, it's not on the. It's on a separate. It's not on the exact.
That is stupid. Right. I'll make a space for my antic, and I want to make a space for the overshoot into this pose. So again, she's going to get more squashed. a bit, squash her head down, pull her arm out like we did before, pull this arm out. So you get that squash, antic, up into the stretch pose, and then we're going to go down into this pose, which again, to overshoot this, I'm just going to make a more squashed version of it. So it's going to be lower down. Maybe I rotate the hips back and the chest forwards, and bring the head down. Let's think, where is this arm going? So it's come up and round. I'm going to leave that arm for now because I can't really see it that clearly, but it's same thing. We can stretch this out, and maybe like drop this. Let's assume that it's overshot and it's down there, and it's gonna come back up. Yeah. Again, that's not a very extreme alteration of that pose, but it's gonna help. So then I use the same workflow. So between this one and this one, my squash and my stretch.
So now we're gonna add the first breakdown.
So
that favors.
It's going to favor the previous, so the left side.
And we're looking at what's leading
and anticipating.
Yeah.
So let me think. So one thing worth mentioning, I want this part to be slightly slower than the other one. So before I was focusing on like this button and this button. Now I'm going to be working with like this button and this button.
Okay.
To make them close together, make the movement a bit more even, a bit more timed out. So we're gonna again with the arc, I'm thinking, do I want it to anticipate? I don't want it to go any lower than this, I don't think. So it's not an anticipation. I would call it just an ease at that point. So if it's not doing these things, it's just easing. Do you think that's a decent way of thinking about it?
Well, maybe? Yeah, I mean, like an anticipation is just letting you know where something, like that something's about to happen.
Yeah.
So as long as that is clear enough, you could still call it an anticipation, but it's just maybe not going in the opposite direction. It's just
it's creating sort of
giving the
tension.
viewer.
It's creating the tension to go back in the other way.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm thinking maybe I'll anticipate this arm. This would be an anticipation because if you watch the gun, I'm going to go down before it comes up. So I might even just drop that a bit more. And then what does this arm do? So this one could I think we'll just put it in arc like that for the time being. In terms of the chest, like this is like quite an ugly looking pose at the moment. It's not really a pose, is it? It's not
well, it's going.
It's
going between.
Yeah.
It's not the kind of pose you'll hold on.
No, exactly. But it's trying to build into it.
You're thinking more in terms of more of arcs.
Yeah.
And how it's going to look mid motion as opposed to how it's looking if you pause it on that frame.
Yeah. Just seeing I'm not keyed on everything on this one. So. Okay, so then breakdown 2, going to be on this side tween machine. Again, I probably want to not overshoot this pose because this is going to be a sort of continuous motion. But I want my arc of the hips to come in line with when she's going up there. The other thing to pay attention with this, when you're using tween machine and you've got a constant motion like a spin.
Oops,
sorry.
Yeah.
So when you've got a constant motion like a spin, or someone's just moving in a straight line at a constant speed, you want to be aware when using tween machine that you might create something like with uneven spacing. So the easiest way to check that is just in the graph editor, I think. So this is rotate Y. You can see this, if I put this on linear quick, you can see that one I put in, because I was favouring this pose, it's made it uneven, so I just want to pull it back a bit, maybe even do that, but let's not worry about that too much for now. Put it back in steps. Right. So we didn't really think about what was leading here, but I think the correct way would be to think the head is leading, isn't it? It's pushing forwards
Yeah.
up here. So then what's dragging here? Probably this foot. And this arm probably I want to drag. So let's straighten it out. Maybe bring it out wider so you get something like that. And again, I'm not even really thinking about this back arm because it's already kind of arcing.
And you don't see it.
No, exactly. Okay, so I think that is fine for now. So the next thing would be to create our breakdowns between this pose and our overshoot into our final pose. So between these two. So again, this side of tween machine out of it.
Oh, so you're doing another one that goes from the top
Yeah.
of that spin
So-
all the way into the settle.
Mm,
So we're doing the same thing. We're doing breakdown
Yeah.
1, then breakdown 2.
Yeah. The confusing thing about this pose in particular is that I would call it a key pose because it's an extreme position and the pose is held, she's continuously rotating, but the actual pose that she's holding with her arms up and her legs straight is held for long enough, I think, to qualify it.
Well, I
as
mean, you could hold it for a beat
yeah,
if you needed to.
Yeah.
So you can consider it a key pose. You can't keep her there for too long, but
no. So then, in that sense, it's a breakdown, isn't it?
yeah,
It's
it
a breakdown
requires its own.
Yeah. So that's where the terminology gets confusing, isn't it? Because it's like,
I know, but that's one of the things. It's like I think if you start off clean and you kind of build up your shot, going step by step, then you wouldn't get confused.
yeah,
Whereas if you start to like try to do everything at once, you do end up with that messy scene, and then you don't know anymore what's a key, what's a breakdown.
yeah, exactly. That's why I think you said in your last video that I work less formulaically than you do in the lectures. Like, that's not true. It's all just formula.
Really?
Yeah, it's just but obviously there's some sort of like, I don't know, some free flowing element
Well,
to
it's
it.
one of those things where it's like you do it subconsciously, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I would consider this, like I said, like the 4-frame rule. It's
Just including the breakdowns.
yeah, and it's well, more in the sense that it's kind of like a starting point, and it's also a safety net for when you don't know what to do, and it's worth learning it maybe, and then changing it and adapting it to the situation or to your workflow even. So let's think a bit about this arm. So it comes up there. I probably, like, as well, this is another thing, don't be afraid to change your key poses, because even if you posed it in a certain position, you still want to have it change with the energy of the previous shots, if that makes sense. That sounds stupid, but
No, it's like, it makes sense. It's like, you know, if your breakdown is working in a certain way, you still need to make it work with that same momentum.
yeah.
Okay, so that's breakdown 1.
So this is breakdown 1. So we're thinking about the antic, which I don't think I need anything too really antic on this. She's just coming straight down pretty much to go down into this pose. Maybe I take this arm and lead with this arm now, so, or this elbow even, so she can use her elbow to come down to create some more momentum for a spin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not very visible, but you guys know it's there. Right, and then let's do the other side of it. So this is going to be overshoot and drag. So I do want the hips to overshoot on this, so I want it to come probably more like there. Overshoot. I always find the hardest thing with this stuff is the feet. but let's see what happens. Again, it's a lot of this. It's like, even if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know how to do this, you've kind of just got to play around. Like, I didn't know where that foot was going to go. I feel I'll just put it somewhere, see what looks wrong, and try and figure out. I don't like this. Isn't necessarily correct either, but I think that works for now.
It works, yeah.
Yeah. So what arm is this? This is the arm.
Is that the leading arm?
This is the leading arm, so we can continue to lead with it, I think. So again, that'd be an overshoot on the arc of that, because it comes down and then goes back up. And then this arm was sort of dragging, wasn't it? So we'll keep this dragging. And we do need to be thinking about the drag on this. So let's drag the chest. And when I think about the position of the chest, I think about rotating the hips rather than, do you know what I mean?
Oh, so instead of translating the chest.
Yeah, I'd rotate the hips back that way to translate the chest this way. And you might notice as well, with the root controller, I haven't been rotating it in anything other than Y. And that's just sort of like a habit I got into, which means that, say I wanted her to walk off in this direction towards the way she's facing, I can literally just translate her in that direction, because there's no weird rotation on her. She's not going to just go off through the floor.
I see.
So it's just sort of, I try and keep it flat. If I need to tweak it to push the pose, I'll do that, but I'll try and flatten it out for when there's a walk or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then it depends on the rig as well, obviously, because this one has the same functionality as this, basically, to more or less the same effect. If your rig doesn't have that control, you're going to need to rotate the hips, obviously. So what were we doing? This is the
we were dragging the chest.
Yes. So I was dragging it back towards that position. I don't really like what this arm is doing, because it's just kind of out. So maybe I'll just put it in front of her and drag that a bit. And I think so. It would be a lie to say I'm not thinking about leading still while doing this pose. It's just not. If you're working from like the bottom up to build a foundation, then I would recommend not worrying too much about the stuff that comes in the previous pose. Am I explaining that properly?
You mean to think more about where you're going to ease into, as opposed to where?
I mean, like, I'm primarily thinking about this stuff.
Yeah.
This stuff I would still, like the leading, for example, if something was leading in this pose, I might still want to have it leading in this pose, and I might need to keep an eye on it.
Oh, I see what you mean.
But generally speaking, if I've done this, I'm going to try and forget about this stuff and just think about this stuff.
I see what you mean.
And once it becomes more second nature, it all bleeds into one anyway. So again, I'm just going to maybe tweak this pose to account for this arm going a bit crazy. And then we just do that ease process again. So you make some space, do this key, think about the overshoot, so she's going to overshoot that way, and this arm can still be dragging. Probably want this arm to overshoot it there. And then again, stick another ease in. Overshoot up a bit. I just tweak that. Right. That's a bit bit fucky, but sorry. Sorry.
I'm gonna have to bleep that one out.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I think that this arm here pops between those two, but and then when it overshoots, it's a bit, the offset's a bit too much, don't you think?
Yeah, slightly, but maybe if you get it in the previous one where it's going down, maybe make it forward more, and then get the gun to like, not in that one.
This
Yeah,
one?
that, yeah.
So drag the gun a bit more and push this down.
And you can translate it, can't you?
The arm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So translate it.
Like down on this one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, we'll leave it like that for now. And again, you can add in moving hold up to there. Still, that's winding me out. I think it's this pose. I don't know. Maybe it does go wider then. Do you think maybe it comes out in front? Something like that.
I think it needs to go like that.
So bring
So
the
on
elbow.
on the previous, when you go back. So on that one.
This one?
Yeah, so I think if the elbow goes in,
Yeah.
it kind of is coming from an arc that way.
Yeah. Should drag this back a bit then. Alright, let's see what it looks like splined.
Yeah. Yeah, we could tweak this forever.
Yeah, exactly. So the spin bit looks fine. All that looks okay. It's just
There's a little weird thing with the gun, but other than that,
yeah, I can't even remember what did it look like when I did it first time in my original.
I think it was fun. It was like, I think the gun here needs to straighten.
So
we cheated to make it like look, yeah.
Still something weird in there.
But not because you're looking at it.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a look at the questions.
Yeah, sure.
So we have one from Katie. She says, "Do you have any tips on reading spacing and timing in your Maya scene?" So she's constantly having to play blast animation. So she doesn't know how the timing and spacing is working, even when using the 4-frame rule. So what are things you look out for when doing your spacing?
So mainly it's like what's leading, what's following. First of all, is in terms of the general pose. But if you're talking about just one part of the rig, say for the hips, for example, I'm thinking about how fast is this moving, and that dictates the spacing, doesn't it? And because we're not thinking about timing, like even with this, I worked on 2s. We haven't even adjusted the timing. So
It kind of created itself.
Exactly. So I think if you force yourself to do this and not think about timing, you will start to think more in terms of spacing rather than time, and you think this moving fast here, so it needs to cover more distance, and it's easing here, so it needs to be incrementally smaller spacing.
I see why you said in the beginning that your breakdown incorporates the 4-frame rule, because the way you work is you are adding keys and then you're shifting then the ones around it, so you're kind of building it from the inside out.
Yeah.
And then as it's being built, because you're spreading them out, it's creating the timing.
Yeah.
And you're not having to then remove keys around.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's like I was talking between, say, it's probably easy to see if we put it in steps again. So between this key and this key, my spacing is there to there, and it's quite fast. So if I think I want that to be slower, I'm not necessarily just going to think, I need to give it more time. I think I need to give it more time to put
Key.
put more spacing in.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. So I'm giving it.
Oh, you shifted just one.
Yeah. So then you could probably just put 50% tween in there, and then start to tweak the arc. Because, like I said, if you've done most of the work in these two poses, the middle one, most of the work should be done, and you just need to tweak it into arc, and clean up any funkiness that's happening.
We've got a question from Lewis. He says, "Can you quickly summarize the points again, please?"
Okay, well, should we look at these?
Yeah, I think.
Okay. So yeah, in terms of contrast, think about line, which is the classic C shapes and S curves.
So this is line of action mainly.
Yeah. And then shape, which was the boxes. So I was thinking about it as well. I think you could probably maybe think about triangles as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I think then it's not as clear as this.
Yeah, I think this is a very clear way to do it, because
Yeah.
you can easily see how it squashes and stretches.
Yeah. And I was thinking about more of like if you had someone standing in like a triangular pose with their legs apart,
Mm-hmm.
and then they closed their legs and stuck their arms up
Yeah.
to invert that triangle. Maybe there's something in that.
Yeah, you'd probably need to like squash a triangle and then like
Yeah.
go into a rectangle and then.
Yeah. But that's not something I've really experimented with. And then breakdowns. We went over how this stuff there's a lot to think about when doing a breakdown, so we need to simplify it. And I would simplify it into arcs and spacing, and I would simplify arcs into anticipation and overshoot, and spacing into lead and follow or drag. And I think the idea with this, in theory, is like if you get really good at this stuff, so you're asking these questions, this will become subconscious. So you don't need to think about this anymore, and you'll just think, okay, arcs, and you'll do it automatically.
Yeah.
And spacing, you'll do it automatically. And then you'll stop thinking about this, and you'll think breakdowns, and you'll just do the breakdowns.
One thing I like about this approach is that it's actually safer,
Yeah.
because you're not relying on one breakdown that is going to take you from A to B.
Yeah.
You're simplifying it by saying, okay, I'm going to do two breakdowns, one that goes away from A
Yeah.
and is close to A, so that I don't have to be scared that if I hit spline that it's going to mess it up. And then my other breakdown is closer to B.
Yeah.
And if you need something between those two breakdowns, that's fine enough. But
Yeah.
but basically what we've seen here is that you don't sometimes. It's just very
like,
simple.
A lot of the time you don't, but on slower movements you probably do.
Yeah.
But the reason I started thinking about it like this is because we'd have, it might have even been on GoJet, where you'd have an action and I was like, oh, I don't know how to get him from there to there, but I know how he would leave this pose and I know how he would get into that pose.
Yeah.
So I put those in and I play it and you don't even need the middle pose.
Okay.
Or
It's nice. I like it. It's like you said, a safety net.
yeah.
You can then push your poses, and then you can end up with a lot more dynamic action, and the movement flows really nicely because the way it enters and leaves is thought out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
And yeah, like I say, like if you've mastered this and you're just thinking about it in terms of breakdowns, if you get to a point where you think, you're thinking, okay, my breakdown is, and you don't know, you think, okay, now I'll think about the arcs and the space. You can go back a level. You can always look at the micro tasks within that larger task. And then what else do we have? So yeah, it's just a demonstration of where to place the breakdowns on a timing chart, on a spacing chart. I don't really use spacing charts really.
It's mental, like it's in your head.
Yeah. I kind of think about it in terms of where on the tween machine slider
Yeah.
it is.
Which is pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, it basically is. And that's that diagram of what to put on each breakdown. So you're thinking about the antic and the lead, what is leading, and the overshoot and what is dragging on the second one. Hopefully that makes sense.
We got one last question that says, how would you do something that's like slower motion? I think it's pretty much similar to what you did here, isn't it? It's like this part here, like you just create it because like someone listening or waiting. I think you would do what you did here, which is that moving hold, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think you do the moving hold for as long as you can stretch it out for before it starts to
Look a bit dead.
Yeah, look a bit dead. So then, again, the method I would use after that was like if I needed to keep her looking alive, I'd probably do just a slight variation of this pose where she was a bit more relaxed or squashed down, but very slightly. And you could change part of that pose, so maybe her head could turn and look in a different direction. And that's typically how I work with dialogue as well. Maybe that's worth doing in a future session, to use how to use this approach in dialogue.
Yeah, that would be great, actually. So that's it for today, guys. We are gonna go have some lunch, but yeah, thanks to Dan for this brilliant, mind-blowing session. I'm sure you guys would agree that that's...
Cheers.
Yeah, so I'll put this up for you guys as a permanent video because it's really useful. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Have a good weekend, and yeah, stay safe. Bye, guys.
See you later.